This week in IT SPARC Cast, Chalmers University makes quantum cool. Oracle is looking for $50 billion. Are they willing to pay the VIG? And the AI boom is coming for Apple's profit margin.
Dun, dun, dun.
Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's see what's going on out there.
It's Monday, February 9th. IT SPARC Cast News Bytes is the digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years' experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now, the News Bytes. All right, Lou, what is going on over at Chalmers?
Well, it's really interesting that all these folks up in the Nordic are finding ways to cool things better. I mean, maybe it's just the walk to work. But the interesting thing is once you get down to the quantum level of cold, as we brought you from last year in supercomputing, minor fluctuations in temperature can cause major issues because you're hovering right around sort of the edge of the quantum behavior of the material in the system you're trying to compute with. Has to be very near absolute zero. So that's why this is so interesting. Scientists at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden have developed a novel quantum refrigerator that paradoxically uses controlled noise. We're talking about thermal noise here, which is a major issue, but they use it to drive the cooling instead of fighting it. Now, John and I were talking about this pre-show, and I liken this to Wi-Fi, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. Back in the days when I used to do radios for a living, reflections were your enemy, right? FM multipath distortion was a really, really big deal, and rejecting those extra reflections was a major design consideration for receivers. OFDM turned that on its head. It took the reflections, shifted them, added them, increased the signal strength. This is sort of what I think we're seeing here. They're using the noise, the quantum noise at that thermal level to actually create pockets of less noise, which is where your computing is happening. And the device is based on a superconducting artificial molecule. Coupled to multiple microwave channels, the noise steers heat transport precisely, essentially acting as a microscopic refrigerator inside a quantum circuit. So they're using microwaves to sort of steer the heat noise around the zone that they're interested in keeping cool. So it was published in Nature Communications and represents the first experimental realization of the concepts of Brownian refrigeration. If you're not successful with Brownian motion, the idea is all these molecules around us in air are always moving, just why things are mixed up. Places where that can't happen, we wouldn't be able to breathe. Well, it happens at other levels as well, and they're actually taking advantage of this. How is this going to impact you? Eventually, certain applications are going to need quantum computing. Right? Big multivariate problems in communication intelligence, communication security, bio and materials research. This is all going to drive the cost of quantum computing lower. Hacks like this are going to enable it. And this very much mirrors stuff that we're seeing in the AI sector right now, where all these problems are popping up and all of them are getting swatted down by disparate companies. So quantum computing is still very, very active.
Yeah. So every time we have an episode where we talk about quantum, we get two sets of feedback on that. So we get some saying, they're on board with us and they see where we're going. And we always get the naysayer, whether the naysayer is like, it's way too early to be talking about this. You're boring me. I skipped past it. Or quantum is so far away that, you guys are just living in la la land. And I don't think so. I think that we're about to see a breakthrough. And I think that especially as AI is becoming more and more prevalent in research, that's going to accelerate quantum. As we start seeing more and more cooling technologies that are getting that much better, we're going to start seeing data centers in space. There's a lot that's going to be happening here where quantum's going to become a real thing, and that the challenges that it's faced up to this point are going to start falling away. And it's going to be one of those things that it's going to be a rapid increase, very much like AI was. It'll be a hockey stick that goes up. So I would pay attention to this if I were you, because you're going to need to, because it's going to impact enterprise IT. It's going to impact your job.
I can't think of very many companies. If you're a manufacturing company, you're already doing stuff like dynamic fluid flow, CFD analysis. You're doing simulations of stress for mechanical engineering. If you're a medical company, you're doing all sorts of simulations. Even in the IT workspace, I'm seeing potential applications for this beyond just encryption and decryption, but even for simulation of large scale systems. So
Yeah.
this is when a company like IBM commits to building one by 2029, committed publicly to
Yeah.
building one, there's something there.
There
So
is. There is.
please do pay attention to that, but talk to us about what else is going on in the big sector, because I don't think folks are paying enough attention to this particular company.
So yeah, so one of the largest companies in the world, and you don't. So aside from a couple of recent conversations around AI, you actually don't hear about them as often. And it's Oracle. We all know who they are, but Oracle is rising in prominence and in the news recently in a lot of different ways. They just, took the acquisition of the US branch of TikTok. There's all these other things going on. They've been running the TikTok servers in the US for a little while now. They are now trying to raise $50 billion to build out their AI cloud data centers. So they're expecting to raise that this year in 2026 in order to expand that out and do the build outs. And at the end of the day, we know that Oracle is involved in Project Stargate, and Project Stargate is supposed to be a $500 billion investment. So this is just part of that. It's going to continue to go. We're going to see others doing the same thing. But the reason they're doing it is they're expecting the heavyweights to create significant demand. That's OpenAI, Meta, NVIDIA, AMD, TikTok, XAI, and a lot of those run on Oracle systems, or Oracle at least wants them to if they're not running today. And so that's what they're going to be doing. It. They're going to do half equity, half debt in order to accomplish. So they're going to give up a certain amount of equity, and then the rest they'll take on as debt. And their belief is that these data centers will be basically lit up and fully utilized upon flipping the switch and turning them on. So, and that's not a bad bet. I mean, we know that OpenAI is saying that their constraint is compute, that if they had more compute, they would be making more money. So they will buy as much compute as they could get. So this is really a strong indicator that the AI arms race is growing at a rapid pace, and that I think a lot of the calls for an AI bubble burst are really fear and not really understanding what's going on. Now, we have said in past episodes that there are going to be some companies that do pop in their own little bubbles, but the overall AI bubble is still going to be growing and growing for a long time, and there's a lot of need for these data centers. And if there is a big pop, it's because we don't get these data centers built and that we don't know how to power them. And if that becomes a failure, that's when you're going to see the AI bubble burst.
And we can add a little bit more color to this. Oracle doing this is really fascinating. And one of the reasons that we felt compelled to bring it to you is you probably already have a business relationship with Oracle.
Yeah.
Right? They're out there in enough shops already. You know your AE, you know your SE. You have a relationship with these folks. You probably don't have that level of relationship with Google or OpenAI. So Oracle has been there. Oracle has pioneered some major stuff that is sitting in the core of your systems. So this is really interesting. The same thing that happened this week that's interesting, John and I were talking about, is that XAI, which basically merged with the online social media system X, merged with SpaceX. So we're seeing a lot of consolidation and financial moves right now. And I think Musk's big bet is going to be orbital data centers. It
Yeah.
completely solves the power problem, which is a unique thing to them, because if Starship's operational, it's going to be relatively inexpensive if you own the rockets to actually get the stuff up there. So I expect to see, I thought that was interesting as well. The fact is there's a lot of money out there looking into this, because you and I are finding this stuff to be very useful. Whether you
100%.
are generating images or having it edit video, I did a code project yesterday that worked out really well. I'm not a coder. I don't need to be now. That's really
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
But there is another side to this that we wanted to address as well. So keep an eye on Oracle. Uh, you might not be moving off that vendor, but there's a flip side to this AI boom. And I caught this one out of MSN Money. I found that to be wildly ironic, but the AI boom is coming for Apple's profit margins. So back in the misty ages of time, back when I was young and foolish instead of older and foolish, I married a lovely woman who helped manage the financial, I won't say chicanery, but flow behind building custom chips for a particular vendor. And it's always fun to watch where the money goes because it tells you a lot about what's actually happening in the sector. So, what's happening now is that the AI boom is squeezing Apple's profit margins. Let me show you why. Because all of the we're on Macs here. A lot of I think you're on an iPhone. I'm on
Yeah.
a Google phone, but it's got a custom ASIC in it as well. These are all running on custom processors, right? They're ASICs, application specific, and they are built specifically for Apple. And Apple builds the chip in your iPhone, the chip in your iPad, and the chip in your Mac, and they do a really good job on it. We like the technology, it's been working out fairly well, but they're not the only ones doing it. When you're this big, you get a tremendous amount of advantage when you're fabbing the chips
Yeah.
because I can go to TSMC and say, I'm going to need 10,000 wafers on this run or 100,000 wafers. I'm obviously big business. And because a lot of the money when you're running a fab is setting up between jobs, right? You have to change out how you diffuse the whatever your etch source is, all that stuff, different processes for different chips. If I run a process, say for a week for Apple, that's pure money, right? Once it's up and running, I get my yields right where they need to be. Now something is changing because Apple's so big, they were able to call the shots, right? If I can run my fab for a month a year just on Apple, hey, easy money. But now other people are coming in, like NVIDIA and Google and Meta and OpenAI and Microsoft are all coming in with these massive chip orders. What's this doing? Squeezing Apple.
Yeah.
All those custom chips are going to be squeezed because everybody wants to do them on the latest and greatest process. And right now, that's TSMC. Now, that's probably going to change in the next year or two. I don't think TSMC is going to be depreciated. I think
Right.
it's going to get some good competition, and I think everybody's cool with that. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's cool with that. But it is very much, we're going to see a squeeze, just as we've seen a squeeze in RAM prices. If you haven't noticed that, you haven't actually bought anything lately. You're also going to start seeing a squeeze in ASICs. So if you're in corporate and you are doing acquisition of a product from like Apple, AMD might be seeing some squeeze as well because they also heavily flab with TSMC. The one to watch that's going to be interesting is Intel
Yeah.
because they've started to debug the 18N process. It's starting to yield. They control that.
Yeah.
So they can absolutely pump out more microprocessors. So I think we're still bullish on Intel. We'd like to see Intel out there. We love what Apple's doing, custom silicon. We still think there needs to be a big diversity of suppliers out there. But watch what happens if you're acquiring for your company these computes, you need to look at you might want to lock in some prices right now.
Yep.
I mean, John, what
So
have you heard?
yeah, so the interesting thing is that the squeeze is coming from so many different directions. It's the same that impacts anybody that's working on AI or just wanting to build gear. So, I mean, the cost of SSDs are way up because that's RAM
Yeah.
based, right? So everything is going up and it's guaranteed to hit somebody like Apple. Apple historically has been the big guy on the block that can maybe push his orders in sooner, get things like that. But like you're saying, there's so much demand, and if they're willing to pay a premium, then as TSMC, I'm going to start looking at them a little bit more than I might of Apple, or make Apple pay that premium as well. Now, the rumors out there right now, and I'd say fairly substantiated rumors, that the next generation of iPhones, the 18 series, will not see a significant or any price increase. So that's a bet that Apple's making, but who knows how that actually turns out once they actually get to September, October, and those prices are at a different place. Now, the reality is they're already manufacturing the components for that, so they're probably able to lock those prices in already. But what about the 19 series next year? What about the whatever the next device is, the next MacBook Pro, the Mac Mini, or whatever? How are those going to be impacted? How is it going to be impacted for everybody else as well? As these companies start releasing new gear, and such, does OpenAI have to increase the cost of their subscriptions? Does Meta have to increase the cost of their VR systems? Does Google increase the cost of their phones in order to do this? So that's going to impact all of us,
Quite
laptop
possibly,
prices
I
and so forth.
think.
So you got to think about your budgets here. And since your budget is you need X number of laptops for all your users, and as you have to do your refresh cycles, you need to be taking this into account. Work with your CFO or your whoever your representative in finance is to help figure this out, because it should not only be on IT. IT shouldn't be saying, well, laptops are going to be 25% more expensive next year. Work with finance to help figure this out, to make sure you're covered, and so that you don't get caught cat in a bind and then have to cut something else because laptop prices, phone prices, whatever it might be, has gone up.
Yeah, this now's a good time to talk with your CFO about forward buying and to keep an eye on your supplier and make sure that you are on their A list if they get a notification of a price increase.
Yep.
But this is beyond what we're used to seeing. So this is going to impact everything. It's just it makes sense that, but now that we're seeing this warning for somebody this big, it's definitely something that you need probably to move up a notch on your priority list.
Yep.
Hey, do we have any user feedback?
We do. So Ryan reached out to us on LinkedIn regarding last week's episode where we talked about the work from office mandates that were really starting to turn sour for those companies, and they were starting to lose top talent. And so Ryan, and I've met Ryan a few times. He was a customer from back in the day when I was at a previous company. He said, this is a beaten to death topic, but I stand by my personal experience that there are great benefits to a hybrid workforce, and I won't consider fully remote on any of my full-time job positions. And he says a lot more to it, but basically the net is that he's seen great use for it. Sometimes it's once a week that you have to come in, so everybody gets together, and that he has seen zero attrition because of this. So the thing, and I said to Ryan, was that in my response to him, is that this isn't exactly what we're talking about. I think hybrid can actually work really, really well, depending on the type of work that's being done. It's the 5-day mandatory butts in seats mandates that are really the problem. That is a different mentality. It's not Ryan's mentality. That is the mentality of somebody who doesn't know how to manage those remote folks. But Ryan does. He knows how to manage them when they're remote and when they're in the office. And so this hybrid is working for him. There's a lot of value to being in the office. We're not claiming that, but you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week in most cases. I have had many days in the office where all I do is Zoom calls. It doesn't matter where I am if I'm doing
Why?
Zoom calls.
Why do you
Right.
need to be in the office for that?
Right. So my point is that hybrid can definitely work. And there are certain jobs that maybe you have to do hybrid. And then we also know, like, if you're building something, if you need to be hands on, then you probably do need to be in the office at least several days a week, if not all 5. So there are differences here. And when Ryan manages an IT team where they need to rack and stack. Now, that being said, in response to this, somebody else jumped in, Jeff, and he said, even with network engineers, we rarely need to force them into the office. He had actually said, I said, well, what about when they have to rack stack the gear? He says, we send them the gear, they configure it just to get it up and running, and then they send it back in, and somebody else racks it. A less expensive person puts it in the rack, and then they log in and they finish the configuration from remote. And if you can do that, that's great. So there are different views of this, and no one view is right or wrong, except for that everybody has to be in the office 5 days a week. That's the one wrong view out
And
of this.
there's another factor. We talked about this last year, which was something like Google Beam, which takes teleremote and makes it feel like you're there. Right now, it's really expensive. It's like $25,000 an endpoint, which is a lot cheaper than it was back when we initially launched this years and years ago at Cisco. Um, where it would be something like, I think our three screen solution was $300,000. Um, I think because stuff like Project Beam uses AI technology, and AI technology is uh, evolving very quickly. If you get it down to the cost basis where it's $5,000 a node, why not have a virtual window in your office that you can turn to, that anybody can connect to, that you feel like you are genuinely talking to each other? I think that's feasible. Ryan, to your point, it's not there yet, right? Unless you have a lot of budget to experiment with this stuff. The bandwidth is now there. That was our
Yeah.
major problem. Bandwidth is there. It's the stuff. And I don't see any reason why the price of that stuff cannot be driven down to the point where it becomes useful in fully remote offices. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
We'll have to
So
see
Lou
on
and
this
I
one.
disagree about Project Beam, and I have to go back and look at our notes. I think we said that a year out we were going to revisit it and see where it is. And my take on it was going to be nowhere. But we'll have to go back and look see that and then have a reckoning on it. But that is going to cover this episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you and without people like Ryan sending us their feedback. We love it, even if you disagree with us.
It's
So
fine.
do you have a topic you want us to cover? Do you want to comment on some of the things that we talked about today? Do you think that the AI bubble is about to burst and it's all going to fall apart? Let us know. Send email to feedback at itsparkcast.com. Hit us up on X at itsparkcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. We read every piece of feedback and every comment that we get. We respond to most. And if it's particularly interesting or insightful, like Ryan's was, we will read it out on our broadcast. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next week from the world of enterprise IT. Take care.
Thanks for coming by.